This is a video about the introduction to the song Horace-Scope by Horace Silver off the Horace Silver Trio album on Blue Note. And if you've heard the intro, you've heard that it's pretty dissonant. So this is going to be not horrendously complicated, but a little bit wonkish. And so if you don't know what a 5-1 is, or a 2-5-1, or a tritone substitution, I have some videos on those, and that will make this hang together a lot better. But if you don't know what those are, there's still a little bit in here on a higher level that will help the song make a little more sense. So to my ear, there's a real contrast to the opening figure of the song, and then when the actual melody gets going, and then it actually heads back to the dissonant. So the chords sound pretty jangly and dissonant in the beginning, and then once that part starts, the dissonance doesn't seem to be nearly as pronounced, which is actually kind of a neat trick because the chords in the main verse part of the song are actually a little more distantly related to the home key, which is this note here, D flat. So the secret to the exotic chords sounding normal and then the straight ahead chords sounding dissonant, as I do in the intro, has to do with the relationship of the chords to the melody. So let's unpack that a little bit. The opening part is really easiest to understand if we don't imagine that part is really being particularly related to the chords that are being played. This is a melody that exists independent of the harmony underneath it. And this is a little bit related to something called a pedal point. A pedal point is when you take a low note and you repeat it as long as you land somewhere that kind of makes sense in relation to this note. You can get away with a lot of nonsense in the middle if you are committed to that note. So these were kind of normal chords that I was playing, but you can hear it even if I just hit some garbage with my right hand. If I land it somewhere that makes sense, you can forgive a lot of the middle stuff, even though that doesn't sound great. That might work. So this idea of a pedal point, of playing some note that doesn't particularly need to relate to the individual chords, I think is what's going on here. We have this figure that is just going to be. And then underneath that, we need to get back after the intro to the melody, which is going to be here on this chord. This is the main home center of the song. So this is what's called a D flat major triad. The normal notes in the scale for the song would be, so it's all the black keys and then these two white keys. So we need to land here before the song really gets going in earnest. So the game is really, what can we do to set up this chord? And we have this little melody. So we have very dissonant sounding, very dissonant sounding. Why do these sound so hard on the ear? If we look at the notes, this first chord that's being played by itself is a little bit dissonant, but not anything crazy. It's when we add this note in, because this note is in the chord and this note is in the chord, and they're so close to each other. That's what gives it a hard feel. Same thing with the next chord. So if we look, a lot going on here, but it's mostly the presence of this note, okay? This, these melody notes. If we just take the chord by itself, It's really nice sounding, to my ear at least. But when we put in this high note from the melody, again, we got that going on. That's why it's so dissonant sounding. So if we have the melody in, okay, we have this neat thing going on. That was not as dissonant, but that chord's a little bit funky. We'll come back to it. And then that's also pretty exotic. And then we come to, so let's ignore the melody for the time being and look at the chords. Here, then we have that chord. Already, that doesn't sound nearly as crazy. If I went, it's less hard on the ear. What's happening is that this is a sophisticated version of the Gershwin I Got Rhythm changes. So the plain old Gershwin version would be, this is also called a 1-6-2-5 because the bass notes of the chords are the first note of the scale, the sixth note of the scale, the second note of the scale, and the fifth note of the scale. But the important part is really that these have a 5-1 relationship with one another. So here's home. So we have, this is the next chord, the bass of the next chord, that has a 5-4-3-2-1, 5-1 relationship with this note, which is basically the next chord after that, as we'll see. This has a 5-1 relationship with that chord, which is the last chord in the intro. And then that has a 5-1 relationship with the main chord of the song. So the only hiccup here is instead of playing these the kind of vanilla way, there are a few curveballs thrown here. One way to kind of spice up that progression is to give all of those chords the same general sound as the last chord. So we have, I'm going to give all of those chords that same sound. So we're starting the next chord, the next chord, and the next chord. These are all called dominant sevenths. So we're almost there. If I play you can already hear the chord sounding a lot more like the introduction to the song. Now there's one more hiccup added. Instead of going 1-6-2-5, we're going to put 1-6 and use what's called the tritone substitution for this next chord. The substitute chord is this chord. So the movement is going to go. There's my bass note. And now this chord wants to go 5-4-3-2. So the chords in the intro don't relate particularly well to the melody in terms of having notes in common, which is what gives it that really harsh sound. But the chord progression itself is just the good old Gershwin, I Got Rhythm. When the actual melody for the verse starts, that part, that really has to be an intentional nod to the Van Heusen standard, Darn That Dream, which goes, so darn that dream, darn that dream. The main movement there is darn that dream. This movement up by one key. So we have this movement that is the kind of main arc of Darn That Dream. When we start the verse on here, we don't go to the Darn That Dream second note. Darn that dream. So there's 3 notes in the idea of Darn That Dream. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We instead go to this other one. 1. It's not the same as this one, but we go to that one and back, and then we land on the same one. We get back into the dissonance again. So when we do the Darn That Dream deal, the interesting thing is the chords here don't particularly lend themselves to the home key, but they work because they follow the melody. So the first chords in the actual verse, it's a pretty abrupt move to go from here to there, but it hangs together because the melody notes are really sharing the same group of notes as the chord notes. So we have, we're here, we go to this chord quickly. Now this note's not in the chord, but it quickly resolves to here. Because the chords follow the melody in the verse of the song, they don't jump out as being as dissonant. So the Horace-Scope is really, to my ear, a study in contrast of what happens when we have chords that sort of make sense in relation to each other that don't share a lot of notes with a melody. That sounds very dissonant, versus chords that don't necessarily make sense that move right there. But even though those chords don't move to each other very naturally, because they follow the melody, they feel more harmonious. And the song goes back and forth between those two ideas. Chords that are kind of a little bit out there, but they're going with the melody, versus chords that are definitely more traditional, but they contrast with the melody, and that gives the song its really interesting dual feeling. So I hope you found this interesting. Thanks for watching.